Margarita. It's Margarita here from Inclusive Skating. I'm so glad that you could join us today. Now, obviously, I know you very well, and there's quite a number of the skaters within Inclusive Skating that know you extremely well because they've had you as a head coach at various invitation games, and you've travelled internationally many times with our teams. But lots of people may not know you, so I wonder if you could, first of all, introduce yourself and describe what you actually do within skating.
Sure. Hi everyone, and thanks for having me on, Margarita. So I've been a coach for over a decade now. I've skated my whole life. I started when I was very young, about 5 years old, and my mum used to take me skating. And I remember being so small, not even being able to reach the top of the barrier. And she only ever really took me there for fun. I was never really pushed. I only pushed myself if I needed to. So that kind of fun ethos has been my way of coaching as I've naturally fallen into coaching. So working with disabled skaters is something that was just quite natural to me, to just bring that joy back to them and have that patience for their needs as well. So yeah, that's kind of where I'm at now. 10 years later, we're like you say, we've been abroad to Sweden and Austria and to all of your events in Scotland and around the country, and we've had the Inclusive Ice Academy that we set up as well, and we've done 3 camps so far, hopefully some more to come in the future. Yeah, and just seeing it grow, the whole inclusive skating scene grow nationally and internationally, and all thanks to you and your dedication to the cause.
Wonderful. Now, obviously, we've created a new format which has been recognised now by the ISU, that lots of people will think that it's just the same thing, but it's maybe just done with like different technical rules. Can you explain the differences from a coach's perspective as to what the differences between, say, for example, the able-bodied system is and the inclusive skating system is?
Yeah, sure. I mean, first main point from a coach's point of view is normally we get the rules through and it's a bullet point list, this, and this, and you have to do that, and you have to do that, and you have to do that. And with your system, it's a little bit more open to what the skaters' strengths are and what their needs are as well. So from sometimes from a psychological point of view, as well as a physical point of view, you might be better doing a certain skill better to another one. So to have the full list and pick off the ones that are suited to each skater, first of all, that's a real bonus for the skater. It means they can still compete in amongst a list of things that perhaps they might not have been able to achieve. And I love how you've broken down each element with a scale of value as well, and you can see where that sits. So for example, like an upright spin on 2 feet might have the same value as another element that they can do, and you can choose between the two, and it still has the same base value, so you're not losing out or anything when you're putting the programs together. You can really kind of use that to your advantage, and the skater's advantage when they're making up their programs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that flexibility is really quite important, isn't it? And I noticed when I was looking at the rules for the Special Olympics that the new, they've adapted to the IGS system, that the list was extremely restricted. What was it like? Because you were obviously coaching the skaters when they went to Sweden, and that event followed the Special Olympics rules. How did that feel when you were given that very restricted list?
Yeah, it was, because I had a couple of athletes who physically weren't able to do 2 or 3 of the skills on that list, and each one of those items were potentially giving them points. So for them not to be able to do it meant that they weren't able to compete fairly, really, in the pack of skaters that they were in. So we had one skater that could do everything and another skater that can only do 2 or 3 of the items on the list. Then they're already impacted, which didn't seem fair. Whereas your system, the inclusive system, that's where we can pick and choose the elements that the skater can do well, and then therefore they just have a number of moves rather than a set list. So you're choosing 5 moves to be marked instead of these are the only 5 and there's no others. You can choose 5 moves from a list of, say, 15, 20 things. So yeah, much better in that respect.
Yeah. The other thing that I noticed as a consequence of that, particularly with the programs that you craft, is that the programs that the skaters put together are great fun and that they're very expressive. And I think it's because there's that bit more space. So how do you find that that works for you in practice? Because that's what it looks like for myself as a sort of a judge and official watching what you achieve with the skaters.
Yeah, I mean, it's always fun choreographing at low level as well. It's good that you're thinking, if you're having a routine without jumps or spins at a very low level, and you're faced with moves like lemons and edges, and now we have to decorate them, what I call decorating. So that I make a program like I make a cake. So I'll make the cake, and then we'll decorate it, which is normally from the waist up, what we do with the arms and the head. And when you go to decorate very basic moves, it can be really, really fun based on the theme that they've chosen.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
exactly. And they've got so much more scope. Now, how does that then compare then also with the able-bodied? Because the able-bodied, what are the real differences, say, between the able-bodied system for the inclusive skaters? If they were to take part in an able-bodied event, what do you think would be the big differences?
Yeah, I mean, you're back to that kind of restricted list again, slightly. And then the low levels, I mean, they're starting to bring them down now to the lower levels, but the inclusive system goes right down. So I think your equivalent of level 1 and 2 and 3 and inclusive is still under NISA level 1 kind of level. So you've got much more scope below the bottom end. So for those skaters that might potentially not get to a higher level, it's much more suitable for them. But yeah, like you were saying about having room to choreograph in between elements and things, in quite a lot of the rules in the able-bodied system, it feels a bit like you've got to squeeze all these elements in back to back, and it's like element, and there's no sort of breathing room in between. It's difficult to work with sometimes to find that space within there to put that extra choreography in.
Yeah, exactly. I think also because we've got on average roughly one element to every 15 seconds. That's roughly the way that it's like crafted, at the very most 20-25 seconds. And that really gives them the time also to perform the element and to give this, like as you say, the decoration within the element, but also before and after. So it looks much more like a choreographed whole. For me, it was important that the skaters also had the time to be able to perform the element well, because a lot of our skaters have got challenges. So it makes it much safer for them to be able to perform well if they've got a less intense program. Just going from one element to the next is really too pressurized for the inclusive skaters, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. I think just for an example, Rebecca that I teach, she can do a teapot, but it takes her a good few meters to prepare and to prepare this as well to really do that move under control. So yeah, I totally agree with that. It's much better. Yeah, definitely.
Exactly. Some people are quite surprised that the programs are relatively long for the lower level skaters, or what they would regard as lower level skaters, but for our inclusive skaters. And when you actually explain that they actually take longer to do each element, it takes them, they don't quite compute that, but it's much better to give them time to perform well, because I think the hallmark of inclusive skating is that we're always trying to allow the skater to be the best that they can be.
Yes, which is really supportive in your system. I mean, generally, not for everyone, but generally, there is a slight lack of confidence from most skaters with a disability. So to be having that extra support, that extra time, not only in how you structure the programs and the time that you've given them, but the whole, and I'm sure we'll get onto this, the whole social aspect of your competitions in comparison to able-bodied competitions and places like Special Olympics. Everyone's always really, really friendly and supportive, and we really do look after each other out there as coaches, rinkside, skaters on and off the ice, all the parents, the carers, everyone gets involved. It's a lovely atmosphere at your competitions, really is.
Oh yeah, I love them. It gets me up in the morning. But a lot of people won't realise the importance of the relationship that exists between the parents, the coaches and the skater. From a coach's point of view, can you explain the difference between that and the able-bodied system, and probably also the Special Olympics, because there doesn't seem to be any difference in the way that they view that relationship? So do you want to explain the differences from your point of view?
Yeah, I mean, something I always try and build as a coach is that triangle: coach, skater, parent. It's not always easy. Yeah, so able-bodied, normally the parents just trusting the coach to do a good job, and off they go. There is obviously, as much as possible, communication between coach and parent. I feel like there's a whole lot more from my point of view. With the inclusive skaters that I teach, I'm constantly talking to the parent and the carer about their needs, about even on the day, what kind of a day they've had, what kind of a night they've had. If there any way that they teach something off ice that I can teach it on ice. Just, it's very constant, the feedback for how we teach them, how we care for them on and off the ice, how they tick, so how they you might need to cheer them up if they're upset, or how to celebrate with them without making it over the top or embarrass them. Just little things like that just seem to be a bit more highlighted in the inclusive skating world, which is great because you can serve the skater much better with that. Yeah.
Can you explain to everyone how we actually achieve that in terms of like the physical locality of everyone? Because obviously one of the things that I noticed when you go to an able-bodied competition is that there is a really strong dividing line between where the parents are allowed to be. Or for example, even at Special Olympics, when we went off as a team, we were the only team when we went to Sweden where the parents were in the same hotel with the skaters. No one else had that. So do you want to explain a little bit more about that, and then how that feeds through to when we're actually working with them on the ice?
Yeah, I mean, just talking about Special Olympics in particular. So when we went to Austria, the actual World Winter Games, and we actually stayed in an athlete's village, which is completely separate to where the parents could stay. And they used to having their parents around like all the time. Most of them were anyway, and they're their sole carers, and they need that support. So it was a huge thing for them to be split up from their parents. And then at the actual event, we had passes. So there was a place where the athletes had to be signed over to us to be cared for. And the parents, like you say, they're like sat up in the stands, and all they can do is spectate, really. So yeah, whereas obviously in your events, they can be rink side, they can be with the coach, and they're there supporting, they're there putting them on the ice and celebrating with them the second they step off the ice, or comforting them, however whatever they need to be. They're there to be parents as well, alongside the coach. So that relationship from a coaching point of view, the relationship with the athlete and the parents is much stronger because you're sharing a lot more of that with them and with the skater. It's not just your job is to teach the technical of the skating. There's so much more to it when you're teaching skaters with disabilities. So yeah, and that's, it's nice having that at your events, definitely.
Yeah. I think particularly it then feeds through to the confidence that people have to both start within the sport, but then also to continue to develop within the sport, and then ultimately to compete within the sport. So there's a very strong relationship. And what I thought was quite interesting, when we went to, for example, Sweden, and you were then operating much more with how I approached, that role, taking skaters away from a team. We did give them the opportunity to have some time to be independent of the parents, and that was optional. They didn't have to go to do the pre-event things where they had some opportunity to be independent. But when they came to the actual event, we allowed the parents to be there very closely with them at all times. And what I thought was quite interesting was that the parents didn't always choose to be with the skater at ringside. Sometimes the parents were up celebrating and cheering the skaters on, so that there was quite there was a very warm, nurturing relationship between everyone, I felt, for our team.
Yeah, definitely. And I think the venue at Sweden just slightly smaller than the Austria one, so it allowed for that. The parents could be there and not be holding their hand as such, but still be close enough to support them in that way. So yeah.
Exactly. And we, for the inclusive skating events, we've got a lot of flexibility. So we allow the parents to be at ringside as well. And that can be really important for some of the skaters that really need it. If they've got very high support needs,
Yes,
Makes
definitely.
it so much safer. So that, for example, for our events, some of our events go down to people that, you know, have got extremely high support needs. They're what are known as Class D feeders, so that they need their food to be specially prepared, you know, and they can choke very easily and such like. And for a coach to take on the care needs as well as the technical skating needs is really difficult.
Yeah, I mean, that was a huge responsibility, especially for me. I wasn't used to that when we first went to Austria, having 24/7 care of the athletes for, you know, 2 weeks, more than 2 weeks, was a huge step up from me as a coach. So it was a big responsibility. And coming away from the event, initially, I thought, I don't really want to do that again until like when we approached it with your ethos in Sweden and they were allowed much more time with their parents, it was much better for us as coaches, because I think in Austria we would kind of settle them down at about 11 o'clock in the evening and then have a debrief, and we'd be on call basically through the night if any of them needed us, and then getting up early to do the events and the practices and the skates. So very long days, very tiring as a coach, and having that care. See, you work with athletes, your own athletes, and you get to know how they tick, but with the Special Olympics, it was working with a lot of different needs and personalities and all these different ways of, and you had just days to try and figure that out and then do the best you could for them, which, you know, we did. And there was a lot of support as well from the parents and their carers as well, that when we do all the get to know me forms. But it's still a big responsibility as a coach to just step up a little bit from not just the technical, like I said, doing all that care work as well, especially if you're not used to it.
Yeah, I think the Special Olympics rules requiring the coach and the head of delegations and the people to do 24 hours a day, 7 days a week type care. And as you said, for 2 weeks, I think it's too much. Inclusive skating, we just don't allow that. You know, the skaters are going to remain with their carers, and then they're going to come to the coach for the coaching relationship.
Yeah, definitely. Especially voluntary as well.
Well, exactly. The thing that struck me about when we run the events with the inclusive skating rules is that there's a lot of happiness around.
Yes, absolutely. I'd say that, absolutely. Everyone's smiling. Even after a bad skate, they pick themselves up very quickly. There's so much support, athlete to athlete, coach to coach, coach to athlete, just all the officials. Everyone's just so supportive. And after one event, I think you could probably first name most of the competitors if in your section, if not most of the competition, because you just get to know them really quickly. It's very friendly community. Yeah.
We do. One of the things that I've loved watching the skaters over the years is watching them grow and develop. And, you know, it's quite sad when they start going off to university, because that's when they tend to sort of like leave the sport, as many people do, because they're no longer able to get access to the ice rink because, you know, they've actually got to move away to go to university or whatever else it is that they're doing in their lives. And that can be quite upsetting. But we get the opportunity to watch them all grow up, and then so often as well that even if they've had a couple of years going off to college or something, they're coming back in again.
Yeah, that's brilliant. That's brilliant. And it's good. From the first event I think I came to in 2013 in Dumfries, and watching what that was all about, and the kind of athletes you had there. I think, I mean, I always remember, because I talk about it all the time when I tell people about that event, was the blind speed skater from Canada. And just mind-blowing, some of the very inspirational. So I kind of went to the event not really knowing what to expect, and came away like, it's a really good thing, and it's great to see it grow year after year, and the amount of skaters, and we see all the skaters, like you say, they're all getting older now and moving on. Yeah, just seeing them all grow.
Now, from the coach's point of view, because obviously there might be some coaches listening to this, what would be the take-home messages that you would want coaches who are thinking about being involved in inclusive skating? What are the 3 most important things that they should know about inclusive skating?
First of all, do it. And I'll tell you why. So much support, so much you'll get out of it as a coach in terms of experience, in terms of coaching experience, in terms of fulfillment, in what you're doing in your job role, if you love what you do as a coach, coaching able-bodied skaters, the reward you will see with your eyes from the carers and the skaters is just priceless. Like, every time I pick up a new skater and welcome them to the inclusive skating community, I just know it's going to be a good thing for them. I know they're going to gain confidence. I know they're going to achieve things. I know that the parents and carers are going to tell me how it's affected their lives in a good way. So yeah, I mean, top 3 would be what you're going to get out of it as a coach, in terms of your job satisfaction, if you like, if you want to put it like that, your fulfillment in what you do, if you love what you do, knowledge, okay, because you've got your online portal with all your training as well. You're going to meet and talk to skaters and parents and coaches covering all types of disabilities, so they're going to give you lots of knowledge and things to try, and confidence to basically welcome anyone into our sport. So skating, like I said, when I was a kid, has always been a thing of fun for me, a thing of joy, so never pushed. So for someone to come along and enter a system where maybe they might not feel welcome, or they have to tick certain boxes, to suddenly showing them your inclusive system where they're very welcome and there's options. You don't have to do this, you can do this, or there's ways they can fit in and feel welcomed and feel included, which is the name of the system. So the inclusive system really does include everyone, and it covers all sorts. Like the Special Olympics at the moment only covers the mental disabilities, doesn't it? So the inclusive skating is absolutely everything and anything that you might feel not included for somewhere else, you can feel included with in this system.
Yeah. It's going to be great fun over the next couple of years as well, because even though we've got lockdown to cope with, it's also giving us the opportunity to develop the sport onto other platforms like inline skating, roller skating. We're doing a lot more activities with the off ice as well, and creating lots more opportunities, for our community to be able to take part. So hopefully there'll be an expansion of the inclusive system right across the whole of skating-based type activities.
Yeah, that would be brilliant. As chapter 2, perhaps. And then I hope you don't mind me mentioning it. Your vision of an inclusive Olympics sounds absolutely brilliant. Just to have the judging system model that you have could be transferred to other sports and grown into something huge. I mean, that is one good thing about the Special Olympics, is the sheer size of it and the sheer amount of people's lives that it affects. So in that respect it does, but I think if the Special Olympics took hold of the inclusive rules, it could open tenfold what they can cover, if not more.
Well, they've had a bit of a head start. Eunice Shriver Kennedy set that up in the 1960s, and I was only kind of like born round about then.
Yeah, no, you've got to keep going. The legacy will grow. Yeah.
One of the things that I loved about working with you over the years was that we've obviously done a lot together, but I really enjoyed it when we went to Sweden together. And I was a little bit apprehensive because technically we were going to the Special Olympics event, but we were actually going to be, operating much more with the inclusive skating ethos. But it was just great. You worked really well with me together, and I just thought we had the most amazing team atmosphere. And it just felt like an inclusive skating event by the end.
Yeah, it was really friendly, really nice, really great experience. Yeah. I didn't regret it at all. And I look forward to it this time with that in mind, because you'd set it up in that way with those the inclusive kind of feel to it. So yeah, I knew it was going to be a much easier trip as a coach. So no, it was really, really good. Yeah, really, really good. Got a lot from it, and so did the athletes. Yeah.
When I was there, quite a few of the other teams noticed that we weren't sort of abiding with the separation of the parents and the skaters ethos. And apparently when someone said to me that we were the only team that actually had the parents and the carers staying in the same hotel.
Yeah. Yeah, it's crazy, but you know, it works, doesn't it?
We all had such a good time. Yeah, I think that probably then brings out like the sort of the key themes that you've just like mentioned. Just do it, which is great. You know, we really do want everyone to come in, having a welcome policy and trying to
Yeah,
make sure that we adapt everything so it
yeah,
meets the skaters' needs. And I think that one of the things that we do very well together is we communicate.
yes.
And I would say that for the coaches, anyone that's thinking of getting involved, you know, just communicate, pick up the phone, make contact.
Yeah, definitely. I know there's a lot of skaters, a lot of coaches working with skaters would fall into the inclusive system.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just, like you say, it's just doing a little bit of research, visit the website, drop you an email, drop a coach that's working in the system an email. They would all help you out and get your skaters into this system, which can bring them so much more than a one-to-one lesson could. And that's not to say that no coach isn't doing a great job, because I'm sure they all are, but you're offering a world that's beyond what you can offer one-to-one. Basically, you're offering an experience through the inclusive skating system that can lead on. Like, your athletes have competed and qualified at your events and then gone to represent their country in Austria, Sweden, and many events to follow. So yeah, that it's a big thing, and definitely should try and get them involved, because if it grows nationally, what I'd love to see is more local events in the inclusive system, and even most able-bodied events including your system. If they that would be a good thing at the end, to go to one event with able-bodied skaters and inclusive skaters together, and then compete in the same section, and use your judging system to differentiate their needs and bring out the correct score in fairness. That would be brilliant, and I know that's where you'd like it to go, and that's where it's heading. So the more people involved, the more coaches support it, I'm sure that would all happen.
I think that's one of the reasons why it's important as well to discuss what's the differences between the way that we operate the event and the involvement of the parents and meeting the care needs of the skaters. So it's not just a matter of, you know, making adjustments to the technical rules, it's also how we involve the parents and the accreditation of the parents at the actual events. Because if you were to run it as a joint event with the able-bodied and the inclusive skaters, they might actually try to apply the policy that they have for the able-bodied, which is that the parents aren't allowed down at rinkside and they're not allowed to be involved in their care. And that would be really problematic. It's a much more risky environment for the skaters that we've got to deal with. If you were to separate away the parents, it would be very unlikely you could effectively meet those care needs. And a lot of people who wouldn't be able to meet that would either be at risk during that point in time when they're separated from the parents and their carers, or alternatively, they would choose not to be included.
Yes, we wouldn't want that.
There will always be some people who will cope with both systems, just in the way that there are some people that are competing within the inclusive skating system, and then they go off and they compete able-bodied as well, and they will always do that. So having an inclusive section doesn't just mean that you're going to have an inclusive section for the group that can cope. It's also for the ones that need our full panoply of policies. They need the parents and the carers there. They need the adjustments and the flexibility of the rules, so that everyone that is within the inclusive skating system is included, and it's not just window dressing of inclusion.
Yes, no, absolutely agree. And we've seen recently, because I teach synchro as well, and they now have an inclusive section in there. So I feel like you said, there's those that compete able-bodied and inclusive, and they can cope with it. And then I feel like that's where we're at nationally, roughly now. And like you said, there's this whole other section that kind of needs to be in place, where there's additional care needs and additional help that we can bring to the events to help the skaters.
Planet Ice, for their events, they've been running an inclusive section as well. And because that's been like a fun type event, it's not been fully based on our judging system, but because there's very little for them to do, because it's mostly like show type activities. But what's been very good about them is that they've listened to me and they've actually allowed the parents and the carers to come in and to continue to care for the athletes.
Yeah, that's been good to see. And also at Special Olympics, talking to the officials there, and they knew of you and they knew of your system, and I was able to just be a little cheerleader there and shout it on. From a coach's point of view, it's like, it's a really good thing. You need to listen to Margarita, because not many people will know the amount of hours and homework you've done on not just coming up with a system like, oh, that will do. You've really done your homework on the physiological and the psychological, all the movement analysis around these athletes and how these moves are. It's not just a list that this is how we normally teach, it's a list that fits those needs, right from level 0 all the way up. And I think that's where you'll trump in the end. I'd like to believe that you'll trump all the other judging systems in place for these skaters, because it's scientifically backed, basically, with all the research that you've done. And yeah, that it was nice to be able to shout you out to the officials of the Olympics, and hopefully, yeah, like you say, they can take that judging system on. And
exactly. It was quite interesting actually when we went to the seminar for the Special Olympics for their new adaptation of the judging rules. I actually started to understand how they had actually crafted that system, and it's basically based upon their badge system. So originally, when they were first developing the Special Olympics for figure skating, they had a system of like 12 badges, which was essentially what they did for the able-bodied system. And how they introduced the skills was very much how it was actually done. And basically, it was like the badges 1 to 5 is level 1, badges 6 to 10 are level 2, right, and so forth. And there was a couple more slightly differences that would be like for 3, 4, 5, and 6. Whereas that's not what I've done. Although it's possible for people that are skating at level 1 in Special Olympics to do our level 1, our level 1 is essentially based upon a functional assessment of how they actually perform skills. All the people that are at level 1 are essentially skating on 2 feet. And if they're not able to skate on 2 feet with on their own, and they require a balance support, then we've got another level below that. So we go, as you said, we go right down a lot lower. But the level 1, which is the equivalent to the Special Olympics, is for us much more based upon 2-footed skating. And I felt it was a problem with their technical rules, because under their new ones, that they had a couple of elements that were level 1 elements, but they were all based upon them doing a badge element that was 1-foot skating. And the people that were able to do the 1-foot skating element were going to win the competition.
Yeah, they were easily ahead of them. Yeah.
Exactly. And it really meant that the people that were what I would call functionally our level 1 skaters, because we're skating on 2 feet, they're not able to compete any more fairly in that system.
Yeah, no, I agree.
They've disappeared. And then in their system, under the Special Olympics, their new level 2 system, they had elements that were based upon them being able to do a curve. And the thing about being able to do a curve is that not only have you got to be able to skate on 1 foot, but you've also got to be able to do the lean. Now for us, our level 2 is that ability to skate on 1 foot. And we're not expecting them to be able to do a lean. So the people that are our level 2 are are only the ones that are able to skate properly on 1 foot. They might be having a wee go at trying to get an edge, but they're not properly there. So we've got a functional assessment of our level 2 skaters, because they're skating on 1 foot, and they all compete much more fairly together. And all the elements are designed to complement that. Our level 3 is being able to skate on a forward edge. So they've developed the ability to skate on 1 foot, but they can get onto an edge forwards. The level 4 is being able to skate on an edge, but you can also do it going backwards. Level 5 is being able to change from one edge to another edge, so that you're able to do changes of edge. And level 6 is being able to increase rotation across the edge, or to be able to counter rotation, so that you'll be able to do things like, for example, a bracket, or you might even, if you're able to jump, be able to jump an axle. So there's like a functional core that goes all the way through the system, that then is allows us to have our impairment compensation operate well, and it allows the levels to work so that people can be fairly within their own categories. And it also means then that when you combine the championship results, you're actually getting fair results. Was with the Special Olympics, I really felt that because this was all confused and it was based upon their badge system, the level ones under our system have disappeared. And effectively, you've got a lot of people skating at level 2 that really were level 3. And so it just felt very functionally very confused. And you're not going to get fair results from that system because it's not functionally based. It's just based upon what someone put together for a badge program.
Yes, yeah. So saying, yeah, there's some real thought going into yours, and it was interesting in Sweden when you were talking to me ringside about the functionality, and we were watching athletes, and you were explaining the different functions that you were seeing and compared to the criteria that they had to fulfill, and that was really, really fascinating. And again, one of those things that I went away and started researching because it was interesting to me on how I can better help my skaters.
Yeah, because the balance is quite core and quite central with skating, you know. Well, we've covered such a lot of ground, you know, and I think we've been chatting for absolutely ages, like 45 minutes. It's been an absolute pleasure. The time has just flown by. Thank you.
No, it's brilliant, Margarita. No, thank you. And long live your legacy. I hope it continues to grow. And I think it will. I think you've inspired a lot of people to carry it on even after you're done with it. When you want to stop pursuing it, I think can continue to grow and build because it's a great thing. So, yeah.
Well, we're creating that Learn Inclusive Skating, the online Moodle courses. So hopefully there'll be lots of learning materials for people to have the knowledge and the skills to be able to do just that and carry it all on after me, because people like yourself, Paul, are just the core of the whole system. We need coaches. You are so important. I can't explain just how important you are.
Yeah. If you're out there as a coach working with skaters already, then definitely get in touch with the inclusive skating system. And if you're not, perhaps you've been approached by one, or hopefully the inclusive system can give you the confidence and the tools that you need to go and help those skaters. And I can tell you now from my point of view, it's definitely worth it. Definitely worth it.
Brilliant, brilliant. And you're worth it too, Paul. So thanks very much and have a lovely weekend. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.